Now let's talk to Ian. I mean, you serve so many different player types, right? I mean, I'm not sure how your metrics work, but one of the questions, because I think it's really tough when you're out there and you're not just a content creator, but you're anybody. The vast majority is a horrible, horrific term that gets thrown.
You know who I'm really jealous of as a WoW player? The people who just don't know anything. People just don't know anything. Like, there's this one guy, is an older dude, just started making videos. What's up, Gojo? How's it going? He just started making videos and he's just dabbling into Mythic Plus and stuff. And I am so jealous of this guy. Like, I wish I was this clueless about WoW. You know? I'm good, man. Got a lot of reacts today. Yeah. Gonna be a short and a long day at the same time.
Thrown around all the time in reference to World of Warcraft is this is what the vast majority likes. What do people actually do in the game? Because we don't know.
I mean, everything. Honestly, I mean, I think that's.
It's hard to say that Ian knows. Ian has numbers, but like he doesn't know the motives of why people do stuff. If he can say it's like, well, people really enjoy the weekly quests for the conduits. It's like, no, they have to do it for the renown. You know, it's like, are people actively going and redoing them after you could catch up to renown 80? Then you would know if people actually enjoyed them. Probably not.
That's one of the quirks of WoW. It's part of the magic of WoW. It's part of what makes designing for WoW really challenging at times. Like, you could take a dozen people, all of whom would say WoW is their primary game. It's one of their favorite games, the game they play a ton. You could sit them around a table and have them talk about what they do.
It's the game that everyone knows that they play too much of. That's the kind of game WoW is.
In the game and why.
Random fun fact, they are adding Lilia and Heimerdinger in Wild Rift next year. Oh, shit. Next year. Well, I mean, it's almost next year. I knew about Lilia. Heimer seems like... Heimer might be overpowered, like, straight up. It's like just...
They like it. And it could sound like they're describing 12 different games or experiences that would be foreign to the others. It really is everything from the, completionist solo collector to the casual PvPer who just queues Battlegrounds all weekend, to the hardcore PvPer who wants to push high rating, to the Mythic Plus focused player, to the casual raider, to the hardcore raider, to everything in between. And then all the different Venn diagram overlaps. And all of those people are World of Warcraft players.
Yeah.
And it's and I think the world is, again, as I said earlier, richer because it has all of them in it. But a challenge is, there is no majority, so to speak. It's a collection of many minorities, each of whom have different and sometimes competing interests.
Oh, okay, cool.
I think that's part of the challenge when it comes to...
I hate Lilia in League, and probably I'll hate her in Wild. Though in Wild, I think she'll be weaker than in League, just because of how movement is. It's annoying to stay on top of the target in Wild Rift.
Listening, addressing feedback, I think, often the two are a little bit conflated, where hearing feedback should mean, in the eyes of players, and understandably so, well...
This profession system is going to be so trash, bro. I can't wait for people losing their shit. I need 10 of the mythic material to craft a mythic item, and I have to be the one who has the material to craft it. So what the fuck is the point? I can't wait for the outrage, bro. I'm gonna be so happy at other people's misery.
Do what I say. We told you I told you I don't like this. We told you we don't like this.
Yeah, Lilia is not a problem.
And you didn't.
I mean, that's kind of true for every champion.
Change it. Therefore, you're clearly not listening.
Especially if that person believes they're a reasonable person. I'm a reasonable person, and I think you're incorrect. So.
And they are, and they are a reasonable person. And I think it's totally reasonable to want to advocate for the game that you want to play and the play style that you favor. And it's our job to take everybody's concerns into account. It's not a player's concern to take other people's happiness into their account when playing a game. They just want what's going to make it the most fun for them. Mm-hmm. And so, I think the challenge comes where sometimes those desires are directly conflicting. Where,
You got an example?
Yeah, I mean, I think rewards are a clear case.
I'd love to get into this with you.
Yeah, right. It's basically people who want to do a thing and don't see any value in it, and want
kind of like doing Mythic Plus or getting only 2 items out of 5 players, 2 items. Yeah, I kind of don't see the point of doing higher Mythic Pluses without being able to reward. So like my determination to keep doing the Mythic Pluses literally becomes I'm going to do the 10 Mythic Pluses for the week just for the vault. That's what Mythic Plus has become for me. It hasn't become like a fun thing that I can do. It's become a chore to do for the 10 Mythic Plus for the vault. Is there a reason to do higher than the max? No. Like higher than like the max needed for the vault? No. Is there a reason to do a plus 22? No. Like you're not offering anything, right? Even the Keystone Master mount, in my opinion, should have been a plus 20 reward, not a plus 15. The plus 15 should have been the teleports to the dungeons. The plus 20 would have been the mount. That would make the mount actually valuable. Now everyone gets the fucking mount for nothing because Keystone Master is a joke.
Want it to be more rewarding versus the people who don't want to be forced to do the thing and want it to stay not rewarding at all. Or, you know, should PvE gear have any place in PvP or vice versa? And to some extent, like we can continue to separate out the ecosystems to solve these problems. We can say there's no crossover whatsoever, and you're basically playing a completely different game if you're doing this activity versus that activity. Or to the extent that there's crossover, there's going to be some people who would prefer it weren't that way.
For sure, because I mean, one of the most common things, and I'm guilty of this, and what I can also honestly say after now we're here is, I definitely got to the point where I was so immersed in it and not happy that I definitely went overboard with where I was, which I think is the place you end up with because of a business relation. It's like, ordinarily I just put the game down. I don't know whether it's an internal pressure, and I kind of think this goes back all the way to Nax Ramis, the original one, where it's like, we've invested time and money into this content, but if we don't make them go, they're not going to go. And I don't, is that something?
Basically Torghast? Yeah, that's Torghast right there.
That's a very real thing.
And they need to stop thinking that way.
It is a real thing. I think make is maybe too strong a word, but if we don't incentivize it,
is it a strong word though?
Progressing in some way as a result of it, then yeah, people probably won't do it. But I think if we made a zone full of awesome quests that literally offered no rewards, as a hypothetical, right? No experience, no gold, no items, nothing at all, but it's really cool content, most people wouldn't touch it. People who did might touch it once.
The reward doesn't have to be empowering. There has to be a meaning to doing it, regardless, right? Because, like, a lot of people don't, like, how should I describe it? Take League of Legends, right? Let's say you're a League of Legends player. Technically, you're not really getting a reward for playing. The game itself is the reward, right? It's like LP, whatever, is just, that's not really much of a reward, right? But people still play a lot. However, you're still technically getting something out of a game. You're getting the blue essences, you can buy skins, you get like these like little things. That's why they added it. You're still getting something. The honor system that gives you stuff, right? It's like, yeah, even though the game itself is fun, the reward is very, very minuscule per game. They're still working towards something, right? Some people just like the rank, whatever. That's what like a lot of people do arena in WoW to get the higher rank. But I don't think there's any content that you just play for the fun of it when there's absolutely no reward. I don't think that's a thing.
And that's not to say that, you know, the people who would do it...
You need, like... Sometimes, like, you just need the smallest incentive as a justification. Even if the incentive doesn't mean anything, the content is so fun that even that little incentive is enough. Right? Because, like, look at Timeless Isle. Timeless Isle was, like, a grind fest to get anything out of it, right? The reward you get for per hour was, like, minuscule, but people really liked Timeless Isle because the content was fun. And you can work towards some reward later on. But, like, farming out Timeless Isle in a bubble, just think about, like, how to get your reward. It's many fucking hours to get, like, the tiniest bit of reward. Right? So it's like, you just need the slightest incentive to get people to do it.
If you're doing it to level, who would do it if you're doing it to get a professional recipe, to whatever, are going to dislike it as a result. But at the end of the day, it is a game that, as part of just the core RPG...
Yeah, but again, he's thinking about how to reward players with a very meaningful or powering or completionist way, right? Not even completion, like for the profession stuff, for example, what he just mentioned. Right? It's like a specific recipe you can only get by doing this content, but if that recipe is pretty much needed, right? You gotta know it's gonna sell for a lot, it's something players want, stuff like that, then you are making that content mandatory for that profession guy, right? It's not like you are making a toy in that profession, like super fun content, and all you get out of it is like for your profession, like a toy or an emote. Like, let's say Final Fantasy does it with what's his name, with Hildebrand or whatever his name, right? So it's like most of the Hildebrand questline gives you nothing, gives you like a dance move and like an emote, stuff like that. Now it's like obviously gives you like the artifact weapon, but before it was like absolutely optional and just fun, and the smallest incentive in it was enough for people to do it. That's all you need to do. Make a very fun content, give a slight incentive, people will probably do it.
RPG progression, you have a lot of goals, you're making your numbers go up, you're trying to overcome challenges, you're choosing how to spend your often limited time these days wisely, and you're going to spend that time doing things that are getting you closer to your goals. Maybe like at the end of an expansion when you have no more other goals left, you might go back and chase cosmetics or do things that, you know, you haven't had a chance to just for completionist's sake. But
okay, so this is why I don't agree with him on this. Mage Tower was never mandatory. For example, almost everybody did Mage Tower while you still had other shit to do for gear. You could still farm Mythic Plus, you could still farm the raid for gear and stuff like that. People grinding the hell out of the Mage Tower, and when Mage Tower wasn't up because it's like every other week or something like that, because like it gets destroyed, you have to rebuild and all that stuff. People would grind out the nether shards in order to do Mage Tower. So in this case, I don't agree with him. People will go back later on to get the cosmetic. Fuck no. People will do the cosmetic if the content is really, really fun.
those feel like lost opportunities when there's something out there that has potential that's just underutilized.
Yeah, so where do you draw the line then in being incentivizing it via power? So, you know, it's Torghast throwing the legendary requirement into there, versus this gives you a cool mount. Do you see a distinct difference in participation? Because it's like, oh, they'll just look at it. And I guess a good example of this would actually be challenge modes.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you know the participation.
Challenge modes, so good. Unique weapon appearances, unique armor, even though it's still not as unique anymore, but like it's still unique because of the coloring on it. Yeah, that's what Mythic Plus should be. The highest level, like a plus, like now plus 20 is the max, but like plus 25. Let's say this. Plus 20 Keystone Master, portals, right? Teleports to the dungeon. Sure, it's a nice boon. 25 cosmetics, 30 mount, 35 something, right? It's like make people work for shit, right?
Participation rates there, which were purely cosmetic rewards, right? That's all that challenge modes gave you, was just a transmog. And did that come across as perhaps a failure because not enough people did it?
What the fuck?
I don't think challenge modes were a failure. No, their participation.
Whoa! What
right?
the
That's
fuck
all
was
that? Challenge
that?
modes gave you was just a transmog. And did that come across as perhaps a failure?
What the fuck is this shit?
Because not enough people did it.
How they fucking do that?
I don't think challenge modes were a failure. No, their participation was overall quite low.
I didn't play during this, so I don't know what happened here, but yeah, that was fucked up.
It got a bit better. I want to say, if I remember, towards the end of Mists, I think we added a decent chunk of Valor for doing challenge mode runs that helped, it helped justify it to people who were just looking to cap their Valor for the week.
Monks used to be so OP.
Something else at the same time. But it wasn't seen as a failure because I think it also, as someone who worked very directly on challenge modes, 10 years ago, it wasn't 30 people laboring to make this thing. It was, let's try an extra difficulty, let's add an extra overlay on the content we're already making, and for the people who got a lot of value out of it, a lot of enjoyment out of it, that felt well worth what we put into it. But I think, yeah, you're correct. When we're looking at a major expansion feature like a Torghast, if that were only used by as many people as did Mist challenge modes, that would have been seen as a significant failure. It's like, we put a ton of time, design resources, engineering, art, iteration into this. If only 8% of our players did it, well then we should really,
See, this is what I mean. Like, he only knows numbers. At the end of the day, if 8% of the players did it, okay, now 100% of the players have to do it, but only 8% of the players like it. That's also a failure, right? However, because you're forcing it, probably 100% of the player base has to do it, and only 2% of the player base actually enjoyed it, right? That's how you should view it. Now, here's the other thing. With Torghast, okay, you know what? The system has to be mandatory. okay, why does it have to be mandatory to do 2 runs? Why does it have to be mandatory to do 2 runs at the max difficulty? Why isn't there like an easy difficulty that's like everyone will do that? And then the ones who want to challenge it will have these cosmetic rewards or whatever, like leaderboard, something. Right? Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, Ian only has numbers. And going by numbers won't tell you anything about what players are enjoying. Because now he can say, like, well, Torghast was a success. Fuck, no, it wasn't. That's why it was abandoned at fucking 7.1. Well, 7.2. 7.1 was still kind of needed, but like 7.2 it was abandoned. Because no one wanted to do it anymore. And like they added ways to avoid it. So either way, at the end of the day, you made Mentor and it's still a failure. So what did you prove from this? But here's the thing. So what they said in Dragonflight is, okay, we're not gonna have any more like Torghast. We're not gonna have any more power system. We're not gonna have any of that. Now the player base will be happy. No, you're just avoiding the issue. You're not fixing the issue. You're avoiding it. Like, it's like no lesson has been learned from the failures. It's like, well, we failed. We're just gonna avoid this issue altogether. And that's what I hate about Dragonflight. They're just avoiding the problems that they caused. And like, instead of like figuring out, learning from their mistakes, instead of learning, they're like, well, you know what? Just avoid the problem altogether. Let's just go lazy mode and just like release less features.
Should have just put those resources into something else that 90% of our players were going to do, because we would have made more of our players happy. At the end of the day, like, that's the challenge we're trying to solve. It's we have a finite team, even as we grow, even as we hire, we have this many, person hours of work that can be done this year. How do we deploy those? How do we allocate those in a way that's going to make the most fun for the most players?
Well, one of the things in Dragonflight that's changing is because obviously part of what I would consider the failure of Torghast is that people felt. I know that one of the reasons I stopped playing was I'd log on to my alt, and it was like, okay, I kind of need to farm a legendary, I kind of need to conduits, I kind of need to do this. And as somebody, as I'm sure you're aware, I was a huge champion of Torghast. Like, I had a great interview with Morgan about Torghast, and then a lot of it changed. And I was like, this is just killing my soul. It made me very unhappy. It's like, where do you then, is that just a case of looking at alt friendliness for that? Or is this in Dragonflight where you actually have completely smashed this out of the park?
There's a few pieces to that. I think.
Smash out of the park means
even aside from
let's just not do anything like that.
An issue there. I think that the mandatory weekly loop, the feeling that you have to do this basically every week, essentially forever, and if you miss a week, you're falling behind, and if you put it off, I think that's something that got us thinking a lot about just the player psychology of how.
I love that this is something that you should foresee. My biggest pet peeve with Blizzard right now is they need the players to tell them what they're doing wrong. That is such a bad way to go about video games. The player base can give you feedback and stuff on certain things, but it shouldn't be telling you that you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, specifically when it comes to like these out of the box expansion features, right? It's so fucking stupid that this is the case. Literally, you have the forum filled with complaints about every class, about every spec, about all the systems so far. Like, that is like, and again, not all of them are valid, sure, but it's like, this is what WoW has become. It's just become a fucking cesspool of complaints, right? It's so like, I just don't like it. It's just so fucking annoying.
People approach mandatory things with expiration date, perceived chores, like that feeling of maybe it's Monday or I guess Tuesday if you're in Europe, and
Wednesday.
the last day of the week is what I'm talking about.
Oh,
so
okay,
Tuesday,
okay.
if you're in
Tuesday,
Europe,
all right.
you had a long day at work, then you went out for dinner with your friends, with your loved ones, whatever. You come home, you're exhausted, and you realize like, oh crap, I haven't done my Torghast
haven't
run
done
for the
it,
week.
yeah.
Exactly.
Oh,
Does that make you feel good about World of Warcraft in that moment?
no.
Absolutely not. And so, why are we doing that to people? And there's a lot of ways around that.
Why did it take you 2 expansions, basically, BFA and Shadowlands, to figure this out? That's like the
catch-up mechanism, so that if you knew that if you missed it this week, you could just catch up and do 2 next week or whatever. Suddenly, the psychology is very different. if there's more flexibility and you can do multiple weeks in a row, or if there's just less, if it's less of an exclusive reward that only comes from this one source. Now suddenly it's fine. Yeah, you're tired tonight. You had fun doing other things. You don't have to log in when you don't want to. But in any case, getting back to Torghast, I think, yeah, it was gameplay that was kind of forced to overstay its welcome in a lot of ways, because it became something that you had to keep doing for as long as people did. Something that we've tried to pivot to, and I know you mentioned you didn't personally jump in and do Zereth Mortis.
No.
But part of how we approached the activities there, the cipher system, the reputations, the outdoor loop, was basically we're going to give you a couple of weeks of the first couple of weeks. We're going to say, here's frankly a carrot that everyone's going to want. You want to get your second legendary. You want the ability to craft your Unity legendary. That's the second one that you can equip. Doing that's going to take you a couple of weeks of checking out the content. Past that, everything is 100% optional, but you've seen it all. And you can decide whether you like it or not. And if you like it, you've gotten a taste and you can keep going. And if you don't, cool, just never go back. You can ignore it and focus on Mythic Plus, raids, whatever else. It's a little bit of a middle ground between there being no mandatory power at all, where a lot of people who might have enjoyed the content will never even give it a chance because they're like, well, why am I going to do that? It doesn't give me anything. Or obviously the opposite end of the spectrum, where it just becomes an endless thing that you have to keep doing.
First of all, just because you gave people the options in Zereth Mortis after you introduced it to all of them, doesn't mean that people found it fun at all. There was nothing special about Zereth Mortis that was actually like fun. Like, I literally couldn't even be bothered to finish the questing of Zereth Mortis. That's how boring it was. There was nothing special about it. There's nothing interesting about it. Like, it was just a whatever, like a nothing burger. It was just like another Korthia, really. Right? It's like, it wasn't interesting in the slightest. So maybe I was biased and I just really didn't care about it at that point. But I really fucking tried. I leveled my warrior from 50 to 60, and then like I went to Zereth Mortis, like, yo, like, I don't give a shit about the second legendary at this point, right? It was like, the fucking content was so stale that it wasn't even worth this reward of a second legendary. So, I mean, just because you gave people options doesn't mean the content was fun. The content was just as boring as all the other content. You just had to choose which one was less boring.
Pretty hard stance at this. From my playtesting of Dragonflight, this has now become almost a core value of Blizzard going forward, or seemingly, but obviously we're here to talk about today, is like just no more of that. No more mandatory stuff. And is there like an internal fear then? It's like, are we making stuff now that people aren't going to check out? And are we actually okay with that? Because a lot of games now are going with a more drop-in, drop-out style, and they're still maintaining a sub. Is that something? I mean, this is a risky move you're making in Dragonflight, I think, internally.
I think.
Okay, first of all, it's not like, what is a non-mandatory? Well, like, what is this non-mandatory content you're speaking of? Like, what, the world stuff? World stuff has to be there. I mean, the world quests were never also were never really mandatory. All the world quests, you didn't really need to do them. You need to do 4 of them. It's like, okay, whatever, right? You still have to do your Mythic Plus if you want. You still have to do your raid. You still have to do your PvP if you want to max out your vault. So it's like, you have less of it, but you still have it, which is fine. I'm not against having these, like, obviously, like, for the vault. I still think the vault is shit, but, it's better than nothing. So it's like, I don't really understand the question where it's like, there's not mandatory. I mean, I know he's referring to, like, Torghast and stuff like that, but, like, what do you have instead of Torghast that is not mandatory now? Like, you just don't have any other feature that is optional. You just don't have a Torghast feature. You just don't have a Covenant feature. You literally just have less features. That's all it is. It's not like they solved the problem of letting people do shit. They just don't have, like, they're just avoiding the problem altogether.
I think so. The concept of mandatory, I do think, only applies to a certain portion of the player base. I think it's certainly, high-end competitive players, if there's any advantage that they can get.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Well understood.
Yeah.
But I think some of what we're also moving away from that lets us, like, systems like Renown or Outdoor World Loop, they have powerful rewards from them. You can make, this profession crafting reagents at the end of a Renown tracks that will let you make 402 plus gear that is heroic raid quality. There are other,
But do you not need the heroic raid material for it?
Progression recipes and other things that people will look at and want, but the Mythic Raider who's looking to, push for the Hall of Fame isn't going to look at any of those things and say, oh no, this stuff I need from this that I can't get elsewhere, therefore I have to do it.
Yeah.
And some of that is just a product of moving away from the auxiliaries, so-called borrowed power alternate advancement systems that we had in the last few expansions. Item level is kind of the simple universal reward. Item level is power, but it's fungible. You can get it from other sources, and it's only as valuable as how it compares to the other stuff you have access to, as opposed to
it's invaluable as the
artifact
content.
power, essences for your Heart of Azeroth, conduits, all those other things, where it didn't matter how high your eye level was from other content, you had to do this because it was additive.
Yes.
But they were great things, though. Like,
Yeah, so now let's avoid that content altogether, yeah, basically.
it was always the acquisition that was the problem. Like, the actual result, great. I just don't want to farm 50,000 honor in Battlegrounds, Like, the actual system itself. And Azerite Armor in particular is one that I'm deeply upset about. Because I genuinely
potential was there.
Item level is something, and again, it's personal bias, I have no issue with Mr. Does his World Quest having the same item level as Mythic Raider. But Azerite Armor seemed to perhaps open the door to be like, well, we can tailor this now to world questing and your experience. We can do it for PvP. We can do it for Mythic Plus.
But you couldn't upgrade it, you couldn't reset it at first. There's so many problems with Azerite.
5 mana more fun things. It didn't go that way, unfortunately. It was kind of the set bonuses throughout there. But now you are upping the rewards from Mythic Plus, giving those guys natural appeasing people like JB, so you can actually stop raiding for the most part. And is that something that's also changing long term, or is there still an idea of if you're not raiding or doing high in Mythic Plus or high in PvP, you should still be a bit lower?
I think there's definitely a little bit of still a spectrum there. Eye level, is if you want 415, 421 type gear in Dragonflight, you're going to need to do high-end PvP, high-end raiding, high-end Mythic Plus. We do want outdoor play and certainly professions to be able to push farther into that track than they ever.
The thing is, I don't see a reason for people who are doing World Quest to get a higher item level than they need for the World Quest. The reason you're getting the high item level gears to do the higher end content because it requires the gear. Like, if you're getting certain item level from the World Quest, the World Quest, the world content should be the item level that is, you should be the item level that is required to do the world content, right? If somebody who's a Mythic Rare goes into world content, he demolishes it because that content is beneath him, right? He's just, way stronger than that. And I feel like that is a good incentive for people to do high-end content. So that the world stuff, let's say you really like world stuff, well, how do you make world stuff easier? Go and do other shit to get stronger, right? How do you get better at bench press outside of bench press? You do the supporting muscles, right? Supporting muscles play a massive role to make you better at bench press. Sometimes even stopping doing bench press will make you better because it will fuck up your nervous system.
For half before, I think at times in the past it's felt
not
like
long term,
if
but
you were a solo player. Well, you kind of
not a long-term break, but kind of like your body gets used to bench press, so you take a small break from bench press. You do incline, decline, stuff like that. You don't do actual bench press, so your body kind of forgets it, and then you go ahead after 2-3 weeks. You start doing bench press again. You might be weaker for the first one, but you'll see that you broke the limit. So once you get to those top limits, right? Just stopping doing a certain exercise will make you kind of break that limit later.
Tapped out at maybe you can get a couple of normal mode raid pieces, and otherwise you were 30 eye levels behind the Mythic Raider. That's I think too large a gap, and something we'd like to close. And that's really speaking, getting back to some of the earlier conversation about player groups and silent majorities and so forth. We do feel like we have underserved the just solo outdoor focused player who chooses to spend tons and tons of time in World of Warcraft over the years. And they care about progression too.
Yep.
And I think it's often inaccurate to just assume, because you're not trying to push high.
The only thing is, so making really hard world content, I'm totally fine within all that stuff, right? And and that should reward a higher item level. I'm totally okay. The thing is that I found with world content is it takes too long for them to update the item levels for the gear, right? I don't think it should get to like heroic raid difficult, like heroic raid type of item level. That makes no sense. But like normal raid, yeah, I think that would be fine, because normal raid is like technically what the story version should be. So if you have like, let's say you have a, you know, current raid is out and you have world content, imagine like this. Imagine like you have like, you know, a king is like the raid boss, and then you have his lieutenants, stuff like that. So these lieutenants and like some of the elite mobs are going outside of the fucking raid, outside of the castle, and causing shit, right? And like you have to go and deal with them. But they are only as strong as the story version of the game. They're not heroic, they're not mythic difficulty, they're just like normal. So it's like the elite mobs are normal raid difficulty, stuff like that. Then yeah, reward people with normal raid items. But that's pretty much where I would call it. World content, in my opinion, is story mode, and that's the highest it should reward. LFR, in my opinion, is like, LFR shouldn't exist, but LFR, in my opinion, is not story mode. It's I'm bored, I'm gonna watch something and get I'm gonna watch something on the same monitor, and you know, I'll just do this in the background.
High keys. Why do you even need item level?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, people want the number to go up.